Hey guys, thanks so much for joining me again. This is a collection that I want to reintroduce to you, and I'm inspired to share with you once again. It's a collection I worked on a couple of years ago through the CHanneling Erik blog. Erik is a spirit guide that I worked with for a couple of years to channel guidance, intuitive insight, and information to truly help you live the best life possible. These are some of my most favorite moments and most loved content and messages for you, and I truly hope that it finds its way into your life and helps you live a better life.
Today, we're going to talk about judgment and karma. But first, I want you, Erik. First, I want to tell you I love you. You must do that. But tell me about karma. First of all, it seems like in the past you've said that there really is no karma, and that confuses a lot of people.
He says he's going like this with his hand, and he's showing like the movement of energy, how energy continues to move. So he's like, karma is real, but it has a huge misunderstanding. So I hate the word altogether, he says, because people think that they don't understand what it means when we're talking about the reality of it and the energy, like what it actually is. He says the reality of it being, people think, oh, karma's a bitch, don't worry, karma's going to come back and get you for that, or whatever.
What comes around goes around, that sort of thing.
Yeah, he says, well, it's true, but let's look at it from this perspective. He says, no matter what you do, whatever you're doing and being, he says, whatever you're putting out there, emanating energetically, you're creating that reality. So we already know that we're constantly creating our own experience, our own experiences and our own reality. So in essence, what we are, we attract. So if you walk around being an asshole, you're going to attract that to yourself. He says, if you walk around just completely like objective and unreactive, then you'll have less that you feel you need to react to, he says. But people have, it's like karma has this negative connotation with it, he says, like this negative attachment where people think karma's just bad, or karma's just out to get you. Like it's this thing that spontaneously happens, that's almost like
an external force. It's almost like an external force, and it's only if you do bad stuff does it come back and bite you.
Yeah,
that's
right. And
that's what I feel.
He says people see it like a game almost, and they treat it like a game, like hard to get or something. Like but it's not that. He says that people have defined karma as being like a big badass that's just coming to get you, that's just waiting, like a ticking time bomb. But that's not true at all. There's if you want to use the word karma, whatever, he says. So there's good karma, there's clean karma, and then there's unclean karma. But it's all because of you and who you are. What you put out there, you attract. What you are.
Like the law of attraction? Are you just talking about the law of attraction?
He says, right, Mom. It's more of that than the way we know and have defined karma. But he's like, we have put karma down inside this little teeny tiny box of just bad.
Yeah.
So, but it's not bad. It's like opposites attract, or not necessarily opposites attract, but even the law of attraction, like, well, what you put out there, you'll get back in return. But because of like Newton's law, like he's referring to Newton, he keeps saying Newton. So for every action, there has to be a reaction, Mom. Their energy is continually moving. It's always flowing. So there has to be somewhere, wherever you push, there's gonna be a pull.
Okay.
It can't be otherwise.
For every reaction, there's an equal and an opposite reaction. So yeah. Okay.
Always creating your own karma. He says,
because
so remember that.
Because thoughts create reality, right? So what you think, you're going to create. What thoughts do, consciousness, is I guess a form of energy. I don't know, but it does something called collapsing the Schrodinger equation, wave equation. So it collapses a wave into a particle. So like a photon, a light wave into a photon. So that's a particle are the building blocks of reality. So that is, why did I go down that road? Whatever. But all right, good. So
he's just showing like whatever you subject yourself to energetically and become a part of, that's the reality you create for yourself. So it's more, he's showing it, karma is just so misunderstood. It's more about
I think I get it.
What you're creating energetically. So
okay.
And most of the time he says create from the emotions. So he says, could you imagine, he's just trying to like trigger thought, I guess. I'm trying not to sneeze, that's why I'm squeezing my nose.
Squeeze, just sneeze. So I can
he
say
says,
bless you.
Could you imagine like building a life outside of the emotions, building a reality outside of the emotions, how pure and clean that would be. So that's what he says, that's what you should focus on. That's where you should like plant your consciousness outside of, because if it's all emotionally based and emotionally reactive, you're putting yourself in much more of like it feels like a slingshot effect. So I don't know what he means by that.
What do you mean by that, Erik?
He literally like is like bouncing back and forth like a ping pong ball, or like he goes, that's just what I mean. You'll find yourself
create reactions. Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
But you can live in love, right? I mean, are you talking about all emotions, living outside of all emotions? Because I thought you said we were emotional beings. How's that even possible?
Right. Well, he doesn't define our being by the emotions. Like we can pick them up and express our awareness through them, but we're not them itself. Emotions are separate. Emotions are a separate energy. So he's showing he's like, yes, love isn't like the other emotions though. The other emotions, Mom, like joy, anger, frustration, excitement, those are all like situational or based on events. Love is not. Love is the one, like go up a level. He's showing love is above all of them. It doesn't need any event or any situation to be present.
That makes sense. Wow.
He says, so yes, you can be in love. You can be in love all the time. And of course, that's what you'd want to do to have good karma for yourself, he says. And he uses like that whisper tone, like almost like a smart ass.
Yeah.
So yes, indeed, like a smart aleck. But so if you want that clean karma, choose love even when you want to choose hate, or even when you want to choose frustration
or fear.
Ooh, you know what he just randomly said? Maybe just make a note of this. He says, Mom, can we talk about how destructive it is to like give the silent treatment? I don't even know why he's talking about this, but like he's talking about how people think, well, it'll be fine if I stay silent, if I don't react or whatever, if I just give the silent treatment, but they're really poisoning themselves in that process. So make a side note. Maybe we'll do another session on that sometime.
Okay.
But
all right.
People think people think it's good and productive. So we need to talk about that.
It's just a form of hiding. All right. Well, okay. So let's talk more about judgment. I know the answer to this already, but for our listeners, is there any outside force judging us, like God or the angels or anything like that?
He says there is no judgment. Judgment is man-made. It's here in this reality. It's created so that we feel like we have power, but it's a false sense of power. He keeps repeating that. It's a false sense of power. So we're mixing up our worth and feeling like feeling worthy and having our personal power with judging someone, something to feel powerful. So it's not the same. He says judgment itself only poisons and creates, he goes, see how I loop that all together? Creates unclean karma or an unclean reality.
Perfect. Very elegantly done.
For the judge. Whoever is being the judge and passing judgment is just putting themselves in that loop of energy where that experience is going to come back to them. So he says,
so we do
whether
that. Go ahead.
You're okay. He just says, whether you're the judge or you're the one being judged, he goes, let's talk about both. If you're playing the judge, if you're judging someone based on their reaction, something they did, he says most of the time we hold on to past judgments. Like we judge someone for something they did in the past, and then for us, we let that create how we know them, like their character. So obviously it's not true because it's not in real time, Mom. He says it's something that happened back then.
Yeah.
So look and see, he says, how playing that role, being the judge, is personal poison. It's just like slowly drinking your own poison because you're fixating on your own attachments. You're fixating on your own expectations of, it could be a multitude of things, he says. People, lifestyles, the way they live their life, jobs, all different things. When we decide to pass judgment, but don't confuse me, he says, he's holding his finger up. There's a big difference between judgment and like personal discernment, he says.
What do you mean?
Because he's going like, well, then you're going to, he says, then you're going to have those smart asses that walk around like, oh, fine, I just won't judge anything at all. I won't use any judgment. I use my better judgment when I did that. He's like, people say, fine, I just won't judge anything at all, and I'll just put myself in harm's way. And, people that take it to the extreme, he's like, but that is called discernment. When you have your own discernment of who you are, your morals, your characteristics of who you are.
Like an opinion? Are you talking about like an opinion?
Kind of. He goes like this with his hand. He's like, kind of.
Like a non-judgmental opinion. Like a non-judgmental opinion. Like, can't you just say, right, hey, Susie is wearing a blue dress. I like that dress. Or, oh, I wouldn't buy that dress. It wouldn't look good on me. I mean, is that judging or is that discernment?
Well, he's talking about, like, he's saying you're talking more about observation, like just observing versus judging.
Yeah.
So when he's talking about discernment, he's talking about, like, well, your own discernment kind of like embodies your character, your characteristics of who you are, and how that plays into like the reality you make for yourself.
Okay.
So it goes like, don't get all bent out of shape about, well, I just won't use any judgment at all then, and I'll just do whatever I want, and kind of like use your discernment and your worth. And stay objective as you can, because as soon as you go into judgment, most of the time it's because of your own attachments. It's because of your own ideas that you haven't been able to see outside of or beyond, he says. So that's just playing the judge part. If you're the judge all the time, stop for a minute and recognize, he says, how shitty you feel when you judge someone. He's like, because I can tell if you don't feel shitty, he's like, you need to do some personal development, because passing judgment on anybody is really only reflecting how trapped you are, really how small you are. So he's telling people to grow and expand beyond that. So now if you're on the other end where you're being judged all the time, and this is, judgment can be criticism, it can be the opposite. He says, but either way, you have to remember who you are, your discernment, and your worth beyond other people's capacity to know you, because they're never going to truly know you unless they are you.
Right.
So why should their judgment ever have such value that it changes the way you know yourself. He says, when you allow that to happen, it's so much harder to go, he says, to go back into just complete self-awareness that's not disturbed or defined by all of those external judgments. You know, for example, he says, let's talk about body image. When somebody gets judged about their body or the way they look, they begin to believe it, when before they were just happy and fine with who they were and how they were. But then they hear all these judgments, and then they begin to believe, well, maybe they're right. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm overweight or whatever. Then their worth begins to plummet, because now they're valuing, obviously, someone else's judgment before their own self-love. So there's so much you have to understand, Mom, whether you're the judge or whether you're receiving the judgment. On both ends, he says, people need to understand that in either situation, judgment doesn't come from love. It makes you small. So he's kind of showing, he keeps going like this with his hands. It makes you smaller and smaller and smaller, whether you're accepting the judgment or whether you're doing the judging. And in that, if you can't express love, for the truth, love is observation, Mom. Love isn't judgment, he says. So if you can stay in observation without judging, and making it's like we come to a conclusion on something and then we pass judgment. If we can stay in just the observation phase, we'll keep ourselves at a higher vibration. Same thing for the person receiving the judgment, who feels like they're always being judged this way or that way. If they can just observe others for their actions and how they're choosing to judge and not letting that affect who they are, then they too will stay in a higher vibration. But as soon as you begin to absorb that and even relate to the way they're judging you, of course it's going to change everything. It's going to mess up your whole world, he says.
Well, what about good judgment? Like judging somebody in a positive light.
He's still showing, he says, even good judgment is still judgment. It's like, it's man's conclusion. It's man coming to a conclusion and defining something. So, that's how we're used to operating. But, Mom, that's not true consciousness. True consciousness is just awareness, like awareness in the state of observation, he says. So just continually observing without labeling, like judging something and labeling it.
Well, what about an opinion? What's the difference between judgment and opinion? Or is it the same?
He says it's pretty much the same. Opinion is more attached to like the giver's ideas and what the giver knows as their own truth. So if they're going to give an opinion, it's basically just a reflection of their consciousness and how they know the world and what they see. So if their opinion on someone is like, oh, that person's just obnoxious, well, they're really just reflecting their own like enslavement to what they're used to, what they can accept, and what they don't have the capacity to coexist with yet. So
well, what if that person? What if the person is obnoxious? What if you are up against an obnoxious person? How are you supposed to react?
You don't. He says you don't react. He says there are plenty of people that are obnoxious, that are hyper, and they have those labels. But he says, Mom, the true awareness can see that they're just at a different level of awareness or conscious awareness. So if someone's truly in that state of objectivity, like where there is no judgment and there's even no need for opinion, there's just observation, he says, then you kind of like one leg up, because you don't have to react, and their behavior won't elicit a reaction within you. So if it does, if you find yourself going, oh my God, I can't stand them, and I got to get away because they're obnoxious, then you even have some work to do as to what is that triggering? I knew the phone would ring. It's there across the room.
Uh-oh.
What is that triggering within you that that makes you react that way. That's something that should raise a flag, like, oh, I have some development to do because I can't be around someone like that without getting annoyed. So if you can
go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say, if you can, he's saying, if you can be present with someone, he's showing like sitting at the same table, and it's like this white tablecloth at this banquet with like, okay, over here, here's a person who's just angry and hates the world and can tell you all the reasons why the world should just be blown up. Here's a person who's completely obnoxious. Here's a person that's completely self-absorbed. So if all of these people are probably going to trigger different reactions within you, he says. Now you have to look at within yourself what you have the capacity to accept and what you don't. If you basically you see and grow through them, but doesn't mean you grow with them, like on the same playing field. So if you need to react, you need to do some personal development, like personal self-discovery, he calls it.
Well, I mean, maybe you don't have to react to the obnoxious person, but is it okay to just acknowledge the fact that in your own truth they are obnoxious? Just acknowledgement?
That's right. He says he's replacing, like, I don't know what the difference is, because he's replacing the word acknowledgement with observe, like just observation.
Okay, it's kind of the same.
The same thing. Yeah, it's kind of like the same thing. Because if you can just observe or just acknowledge without needing to react,
okay,
then of course you keep yourself at a higher vibration.
All right.
But if you react, you kind of plug into it, and now all of that energy just feeds to you.
All right. What about is judgment? Is that a uniquely human thing, or can it be found in any other life forms here on Earth or anywhere?
Well, he says, Mom, it depends on what kind of judgment you're talking about. He says, humans, the way we see judgment is different. Okay, so the way we define it is different, because he's even showing like animals using their judgment, but, you know, animals are actually using their intuition. We just call it judgment because we don't know better. So I do believe, based on what Erik is showing, he's like shaking his head yes, and says judgment is most widely employed through us humans than anywhere else and anything else. And it's like, it gives us a handle, Mom. It gives us like what we think we have a handle on something, because it's that power that we need. Because if you need that power, he's just talking and talking, sorry. Because if you need that power and you need to have a handle on it through judgment, then you haven't come to the understanding of your true self-awareness, and how powerful that is and how all-encompassing that is. That's when you see...
We already have the power. Yeah, we already have the power.
Right. And people that haven't realized that, they manifest into, like, they have these behaviors of like OCD or narcissistic characteristics, control freaks, he says. All of these patterns manifest because they haven't come to that realization yet. So they'll take to a physical, tangible way to feel like they have a handle on something. Yeah. Judgment is usually one of the best ways.
Yeah, stepping on people to get to the top, basically. All right, what about...
Right, to feel... Go ahead. He's just saying just to feel powerful.
Okay. Of course, we also sometimes judge ourselves. We receive external judgment, but we also create our own inner judgment, too. You want to talk about that before we close on this subject?
He's like making this face, like he's like, yeah, that's where it's probably can be the shittiest.
Now, to me, I think that internal judgments start from external judgments, probably from peers and parents and siblings and society and their unrealistic norms and so on. But then we internalize these as our own inner judgment. But I don't know. You're the expert. Tell me.
He says, well, he says most people in their internal dialogue, they hear that constant chatter. But that constant chatter is just an observation. We're observing, again, of something that's not our true self. So this voice inside of us, it too isn't truly us. He says, there's a couple different dynamics he wants to talk about here. When we judge ourselves, he says it's interesting, Mom, because we value that. So when we do pass judgment on ourselves, we value our own opinion, of course, because we capitalize on our opinions. So he says when we judge ourselves, we can be so damaging and so critical, but because we hold such value on our own opinions of ourselves, if it's a negative one, then it's detrimental, like to our spiritual health, our physical and mental health. So, but then he says, then we have to figure the fine line between, it's like when your partner passes judgment on you too, and then you begin to believe it because you hold them so valuable and so high in your life. You have this on this stool. So then you begin to accept what they say as your own internal
truth,
judgment, your own internal dialogue. So he says, be mindful. He's talking just to everybody listening. Be mindful of where you're placing that value and what that's doing to your own awareness of yourself. If your awareness is only built upon your judgments and even other judgments that you've brought in, and you're not aware of yourself at all, really. He says, when you're that process, you do that, and you're like, man, how do I hate the way I talk to myself. It's so not nice. Or, even it's the opposite. People can be very egocentric, he says, and capitalize on their thoughts and their beliefs. To break those kinds of patterns, you have to be willing to just observe, Mom. He's like, observation is just like stating the obvious. If you don't even know how to just observe, it's stating the obvious. So you have to be willing to state the obvious and be objective. But as soon as you subject your worth with any kind of observation or judgment, then you start to fall down again. You break your own self down. So be willing to, and he's even talking about like our internal judgments have a lot to do with like what society accepts as normal. And if we fall outside of that box, then we start to judge ourselves.
Yeah.
So just because society has created this box doesn't mean everybody has to fit inside of it. So don't pass that judgment on yourself that, you don't fit. So there must be something wrong. Stay as much as you can. Stay in a place of neutral awareness.
So it seems like to me that we have to ask ourselves, is this coming from my awareness of who I am, or is it coming from somebody else's or other people's or society's awareness of who I am? Is that something, the practical mantra or whatever or exercise that we can engage in? Or maybe you have another better one. You probably do. What?
Yeah, he says you're right. Because if you can just take the time to kind of quiet yourself and say, is this me? Is this me or something else? Then you're staying present with what you're observing, what you're feeling, what you're experiencing. So it's kind of like, emotional awareness too. Because like when I was at this crazy emotional event, everybody was bawling their eyes out except me. And I felt like a cold heart bitch because I wasn't crying. But I kept asking myself that because I was like begging for my guides to get me through this event. Yeah. And they just kept saying, is this you? Is this you? Be aware. Is what you're feeling, is it you? And it wasn't. So the emotions, it was just all, it was just crazy. But having that awareness, thank you to Erik and my guides, got me through that event and kept me present with what I was feeling, even though everybody around me had this massive collective depressed energy. Yeah. So if you guys can stay too in a place, he says, where you can ask yourself emotionally, mentally, and physically those judgments that you're passing on yourself or accepting from others or passing on to others. If you can just say, is this me? Then you separate yourself from that, from absorbing like the collective, turning it into your own internal dialogue, or even being a channel for it. He's like, that's what's even worse. If you accept it and then you begin to pass that judgment too. Yeah. So it just takes mindfulness, Mom, to think about it. Like, think about what you're feeling. Well, that's the trouble these days.
What about inner good judgment? If you pass good judgments on yourself, I guess the same thing. You have to be aware of whether that's your truth, whether that's your awareness of who you are or not. But is that okay?
He says, well, it's a process and we do it, but he says, really, there's no judgment. There's just love.
Okay.
So
just love yourself.
You can just love. Yeah. You can just love yourself. So he's kind of like, it dissolves or dilutes the judgment process altogether.
Well, can't you say, wow, I just really love my new hairdo, things like that. Or I love the way I dress.
Right.
You know.
Right. That's the key word.
Is that okay?
He says, as long as you don't capitalize on it. Because then, of course, you create more judgments and then it becomes a mess.
All right.
But the key word is love.
Okay. Anything else on judgment or karma that you think we should know?
He's just saying for judgment, like, don't become a conduit for it. Like, because people judge you, then you pass that judgment to others. Like, don't funnel that shit through you. He says, with karma, he's like, can we get rid of the negative attachment already? Yeah. He's like, it's just a reality. You're creating your own reality. So that's essentially what karma is. It's not a negative thing.
All right, I truly hope you enjoyed that message, and there's going to be plenty more where that came from. We're going to continue to share these messages with you and continue to channel Spirit to inspire you, ground you, and help you feel connected. Join our community. You can like and subscribe to this channel to stay in the loop with more content as we share more information. Also, join me online. My website is kimberly-ray.com, and you can find me on social media across the board. Join our community online at kimberly-ray.com. Feel free to submit your questions and join our retreats. We have retreats all around the world every year, throughout the year. Also, if you'd like a one-on-one session, connect with your loved ones. You can join me online as well. Social media across the board, find me on Facebook and Instagram as well. And as always, take good care of yourself and take care of each other. Thanks for watching, guys. See you soon.